Hey guys, this is Crowbar Zero, and today I'm going over just kind of like what is the early game versus the mid game versus the late game. What does that actually look like? And so when you first start, you don't have access to a lot of the tools that you're eventually going to get as you go along, and the scaling of things changes everything as far as the very early game versus the late game. So let's kind of jump into things. Um, Actually, during the early game, some of the best tools, once you can get access to them, are actually having really high health, defense percent, and absolute defense. They scale really well within the first tier, and the majority of the damage that you can get away with and kind of sneak by and kind of focus your the money that you make in the match is going to be on Thorns damage, and just making sure that you know the enemies are doing as little damage to you as possible, or maybe no damage and they're just basically beating themselves to death. As you get on to like tier 2, tier 2 is actually like a really drastic change. It's roughly about 20 times as more difficult versus tier 1. So you're going to want to put quite a few points into just a lot of your stats across the board. Just a note, especially for early game players, I would say hold off on putting any points, or especially once you have access to the lab research, don't put any points into range. And I'll be going over that in another video, but in some cases, having your range off just a little bit can actually be hugely detrimental. Anyway, so let's jump into some of these things. So as you get into the mid game, you know, a lot of it's going to be, you know, doing a lot of damage. The majority of what you kind of do is based on the damage that you do until you start transitioning more into like the late game. Eventually, you're going to get to the point where the damage that you do is just not going to keep up with the enemies that are going to be around you. So using things such as Orbs, which cause basically like an instant kill, and you can kind of see that on the screen right now. I'm killing quite a few enemies right now with the Orbs. I've got my death ray that just, you know, across the map and just clears out a bunch of enemies. Really great tools once you're getting into the late game. Personally, I consider myself like a mid, like right in that weird transition of mid game to late game, and I'm almost there, but I know what the late game is gonna look like, and you know, you can see a little bit of it in progress. Right now my range is not quite where it needs to be, but as soon as I buy out all of the cards that I need and the card slots, you know, at that point, and I've reorganized my range properly, at that point I'd consider myself getting more into that late game aspect. Yeah, so some of the tools that, you know, you'll see here for the defense, just going down the middle of Thorns damage, especially once you get into the mid to late game, that's actually going to be hugely important, because half of that actually goes towards dealing damage to bosses. So usually, especially very late game, you want to get it so the boss only needs to touch you once, and the Thorns damage will take out nearly half of its life. Knockback chance and knockback force, you get it fairly early on, but that's actually one of the most important mechanics, especially when it comes to attack rate in the later game, to be able to kind of keep enemies pushed back and within that orb range. You know, again, as I mentioned, like mid game, you're just not going to have the coins to invest into having the orb coverage that you really need with like inner orbs, or even maybe you don't even have the inner orbs card, or maybe that's not even leveled up properly. Eventually you can adjust it. Once, I believe it's around tier 6, you're able to get the research done to be able to adjust the distance. I'll show you what that looks like right now. So right now my inner orbs is at 100%, but if I move it over, you can see the little orbs out there kind of increase their distance. And I just moved it out to 150%, and moving that back. So that's a very important tool. I'm gonna go over that a little bit later in another video, but kind of give you an idea there. Shockwave, that one's kind of a mixed basket. So it's great, it just in general as a concept to be able to knock enemies back. Supposedly right now there's been some reports of a little bit of a bug where your plasma cannon may be consumed or be lost due to shockwave. So, but overall it's a good mechanic. Landmines, you're eventually going to get to the point where the damage that they do is just inconsequential. And Defy Death, basically that chance maybe that you'll be able to, you know, if you get hit and that hit would maybe kill you, kind of get around that. Utility, some of the most important aspects in the utilities, especially going into the late game, are going to be the cash bonus and the coins. Basically, both the cash bonus and the coins per kill are affected whenever you kill an enemy. Different things like, especially Golden Tower is going to scale very well with both of those stats. The free upgrades. Out of the three of them, free defense would be the most useful. Some of the more advanced players are not going to have the attack or the utility upgraded for the fact that they do not want their range to be touched, and hence they'll just not upgrade those. So I'm not quite there yet, but that will be one of those things that I'm going to be redoing on my spec pretty soon. Interest per wave, it sounds like a really nice mechanic, but it does cap out, so you would have to do research in the labs to increase that, and especially with things like Golden Tower, the interest just becomes an inconsequential mechanic in the game. The recovery amount, max recovery, and package chance, those are super useful because as you're going along, especially mid to late game, you want to receive those packages. So ideally what it would look like is you would ideally would not want to be hit at all from the basic enemies, your mob enemies, your tank enemies, your ranged, any of that. And the whole point of the package is when you get hit by the boss is they're going to take a chunk off your health, and then those packages are going to come in and they're going to heal you until the next boss wave and have you fully stacked up with ideally up to, as you can see, max recovery, which is 3 times, so basically 3 bars of health. Going over to the attack, this is a little bit of an outdated graphic, but because now we've got super crits, so super crit chance and super crit multiplier. Both of those are extremely expensive down at the bottom, but the first couple ranks aren't too bad and they're kind of affordable, so not bad to get. Damage, pretty self-explanatory. Increases your base damage. Attack speed, super important. That higher that attack speed, the more chance you're going to be able to knock enemies back. You're going to be able to get, you know, various other procs other than just knockback. And yeah, Critical chance, critical factor. Right now it shows 80% on this table, but really you can cap it out at 90 with the critical chance card. Once you get, I would say, early-ish, kind of transitioning into the mid-game, you'll just start to notice that the only damage that is actually worthwhile, or pretty much, or that kills anything, is going to be the damage that you do as a result of a crit. Attack range, oh, that's a mixed bag. So, the ideal two ranges for attack range are going to be about 63. I say 63, some people would be like, 60 to 64, somewhere within that spectrum. The other range is 45. 45 is for if you have the ultimate weapon, Black Hole, and also it's really nice that shorter range of 45 will be useful for Coinbot, because that has a limited range, and so if your range is smaller, that Coinbot range is going to encompass a lot greater percentage of your shown range. 63 is about the sweet spot to avoid as many of the chip hits from ranged units as possible. And also gives you a little bit of buffer room, so ideally, hopefully the game is going to pick up when the fast units are rushing in, so it'll give you a little bit of a buffer also for those units, whereas the 45 meter range, that's not going to give you as much of a buffer there. Damage per meter, effectively it's another damage multiplier. Whether or not, depending on where your range is still gonna give basically that percentage increase to whatever your DPS is currently at. Just trying to make it as simple as possible. Multi-shot chance, that's super important. Keep the mobs off you as much as possible. For some builds, you might not want to have that leveled up, but that's more of like an advanced strategy. For early to mid game, I would say definitely level those up. Super useful to keeping the enemies off your tower. Same thing with rapid fire duration. You'll probably notice that before you even max those two stats, you will probably already have that going constantly all the time. Not really going to get much downtime. Bounce shot chance, and the number of targets and the range. Bounce shot was traditionally a, I guess, perceived as almost like a negative mechanic, because there was a chance that the bounce shot could push enemies towards your tower, so obviously you don't want that. But in a more recent update, supposedly that was fixed, so hopefully that's not going to be an issue going forward as much, and everyone can benefit from the bounce shots. Also nice for being able to reach enemies far away. Anyway, I just wanted to go over the workshop really quick, give a perspective on what the different stats actually mean at different places in time during your gameplay, and hopefully you guys found that useful.